Have you ever walked around a neighborhood and noticed that many of the houses have the same shape? Perhaps you've noticed a consistent number of characteristics, such as the front yards being the same depth, or that the houses are all the same height. If you have, you are most likely experiencing the rules and regulations imposed by the local zoning ordinances being played out. It is these zoning ordinances that help shape the cities and towns we live in. So, what are zoning ordinances? By its definition, zoning is the separation or division of a city or town into districts, the regulation of buildings and structures in such districts in accordance with their construction and the nature and extent of their use, and the dedication of such districts to particular uses designated to serve the general welfare. In other words, zoning ordinances are a set of laws and regulations that define how a particular property can be used. If zoning ordinances didn't exist, property owners would more or less be able to build whatever they liked on their property. Cities and towns would most likely consist of haphazard buildings that were built without a sense of planning. Industrial or high-rise commercial buildings may be built next to residential houses, resulting in non-cohesive neighborhoods and districts. Zoning ordinances, at their essence, were implemented to protect the health and safety of the population. They commonly regulate what uses are allowed on a particular property, the minimum and maximum size of a property, how densely a property can be developed, and the maximum building size that can be built on a property. A city or town's zoning ordinances will be spelled out in the local zoning resolution and zoning maps. These are public documents that can be found through the local planning department and/or Department of Buildings. Zoning maps are actual maps of a municipality with the designated zoning districts overlaid on the top of the map. A municipality is typically organized into three primary types of zoning districts: residential, commercial, and industrial or manufacturing. Residential zones are commonly designated with the letter R and serve as a zoning district in which residences are permitted. This includes residences ranging from single-family homes to large high-rise rental or condominium towers. Commercial zones are commonly designated with the letter C and serve as a zoning district in which commercial uses are allowed, such as office or retail space. And industrial or manufacturing zones are commonly designated with the letter M and serve as a zoning district in which manufacturing uses are permitted, such as factories or warehouses. In addition, each of the primary zoning districts may be broken down into different densities. For example, there may be residential zones that allow single-family homes, while other residential zones only allow large-scale apartment buildings. The zoning maps will geographically show which parts of a municipality can include residential uses, which parts can include commercial uses, and which parts can include industrial uses. The zoning districts and the permitted densities within each district are typically derived from the municipality's master plan, set forth by the local Department of Planning. Perhaps the master plan promotes single-family communities in a particular area, while large-scale office buildings are reserved for downtown commercial districts. This will manifest itself in the zoning maps. The zoning resolution, on the other hand, is a written document that describes, in detail, what can be built on a particular property, based on the zone of that property. The zoning resolution for a small town or village may be very short, perhaps only a few dozen pages long. On the other hand, the zoning resolution for a large city, such as New York City, will most likely be very long and complex. While zoning maps will tell you what uses, residential, commercial, and industrial, can be built on a property, the zoning resolution will tell you the bulk regulations that must be followed when building a new house or expanding on an existing one. The bulk regulations dictate the allowed building envelope for a structure on the property. The building envelope is the maximum three-dimensional space on a property within which a structure can be built, as permitted by applicable height, setback, and yard controls. In other words, the building envelope set forth in the zoning resolution directly influences the shape of a house or building on a particular property. When you think of a building envelope, imagine a box set on a table where the building is the box and the table surface is the plot of land where the building is set on. The box has three dimensions: height, width, and depth, as is the case with any building. The zoning ordinances determine how big the box can be and how much of the table area it is going to occupy or cover. The building envelope is determined by several fundamental requirements. These include yard setbacks, the maximum lot coverage or building footprint allowed on a property, the maximum permitted height, and the floor area ratio. Let's go over each of these requirements so that you can get a better understanding of how a building envelope is determined. Each zoning district will have required yard setbacks. This means that the exterior wall of a building cannot be within a certain distance from the property line. In most residential zones, you will have a front yard requirement, side yard requirements, and a rear yard requirement. For example, the zoning resolution may dictate that in low-density residential areas, all properties must include at least a 20-foot front yard, 2 side yards each measuring at least 10 feet wide, and a 30-foot rear yard. These yard requirements are typically enacted to allow enough light and air to reach a house. Otherwise, if all houses were built to cover the entire property, our neighborhoods will seem much more crowded and dark. The yard requirements will give you a perimeter within which a building can be built on the property. Next, you have to factor in the maximum allowed lot coverage. Lot coverage is that portion of a property which, when viewed from above, is covered by a building. The zoning resolution will typically tell you the maximum number of square feet that a building can cover the property. It may be stated as an actual number or a percentage of the property's area. For example, the lot coverage cannot exceed 50% of the total area of the property. Next, the zoning resolution will state the maximum height of a building, which again depends on the zone of the property. Lower density residential zones may cap the maximum building height at 25 feet or 30 feet, while larger scale residential zones may allow a maximum height of 100 feet or 120 feet. The yard requirements, lot coverage, and maximum building height will give you the building envelope within which the building can be built. The last requirement to check is known as the floor area ratio. The floor area ratio, as referred to as FAR, is a formula that determines the maximum allowed buildable square footage on a property. It is expressed as a ratio of the total building floor area to the area of the zoning lot. Each zoning district has a FAR, which, when multiplied by a property's area, produces the maximum amount of floor area allowable in a building on the property. The zoning resolution will typically state the FAR for each zone. For example, a large-scale residential zone may have a FAR of 6.0. If a property in this zone measures 10,000 square feet, the total floor area of a building on the property cannot exceed 60,000 square feet, 10,000 multiplied by 6. Now, if the zoning resolution allowed 100% lot coverage and didn't have any required yard setbacks, the building would be 6 stories high. However, nearly all residential zones have such requirements, which would make the building much taller than 6 stories. So, when you apply these 4 basic requirements to a property, you can start to see the size and shape of the building take effect. One last point to note. The zoning resolution will also include requirements with regards to parking. The zoning resolution may demand that a property have a minimum number of parking spaces available in order to reduce the demand for street-side parking in the neighborhood. In addition, a property may be required to have a parking garage in the rear yard with a driveway located in the side yard. Parking requirements will vary per zoning district, but just remember, these requirements have to be considered as well. Now, when a property fully complies with the zoning resolution, it is said that the property is built as of right. Most properties you see will be built as of right. When you see a property that is not built as of right, it may mean that the owner modified their house without first obtaining approvals and building permits from the local Department of Buildings. This is illegal and may result in an expensive building violation for the owner. There are times, however, when the Department of Buildings will allow an owner to build a structure on their property that does not comply with the zoning ordinances. These are special cases that are granted to owners who are experiencing hardships with their property. In these cases, the municipality may grant what is called a variance to the property owner. A variance is the authorization to improve or develop a property in a manner not originally authorized by zoning. There are 2 primary types of variances: area variances and use variances. Area variances allow the property owner to build a structure that does not fully comply with the dimensional requirements of the zoning resolution, yard setbacks, height, etc. For example, if a property is irregularly shaped and cannot fully comply with the required yard setbacks, the local zoning authorities may grant the owner permission to have reduced yard setbacks in order to give the owner the opportunity to build a feasible building on the property. A use variance, on the other hand, allows the owner to continue using a property in a manner that no longer complies with the most recent zoning resolution. For example, if an existing commercial building now sits in the middle of a residential zone, it will be considered a non-conforming use. The local zoning authorities may grant the owner of the commercial building a use variance, which will allow the owner to continue using the building as such. Oftentimes, the use variance will terminate once the building is significantly modified or torn down. You should never assume that the use variance will extend after the building is sold to a new owner. It is always good practice to verify with the local zoning authorities if the use variance will stay in effect after the property is sold. Let's now complete this lesson by discussing how zoning ordinances will play a role in your day-to-day career as a real estate agent. You will not be asked to conduct a zoning analysis of a property, as this is the job of a licensed architect. However, it is good practice to have a general understanding of the zoning ordinances in your market, as this will give you a better idea as to why a particular neighborhood is built the way it is. It may also allow you to see opportunities that other agents and clients do not see. Perhaps the local planning department recently upzoned a neighborhood, allowing more square footage to be built on a property. For example, if you know that a neighborhood in your market was recently upzoned from a FAR of 5.0 to 6.0, then the properties in that zone will become much more valuable since you can now build 20% more square footage. There are also times when a municipality would want to revitalize a particular part of the town or city. Over the past few decades, many municipalities have rezoned historically industrial areas, which consisted of abandoned warehouses and factories, into residential and commercial zones. The old warehouses and factories have now been converted into trendy apartments and office spaces. As a real estate agent, just by following the areas where the local municipality is rezoning and investing public resources, you can spot the path of progress in your market. Again, this is valuable information that you can pass on to your buyers and sellers.